Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into Alan Moore's Do Design. Why beauty is key to everything. I'm really excited about this one. I mean, honestly, who doesn't want to, bring a little more beauty into their lives?
It's a great topic, and Moore does a really brilliant job of challenging that idea that beauty is, superficial or just about aesthetics. He really argues that beauty is a fundamental principle that can be intentionally, designed into everything that we do.
Yeah. And speaking of that, he says right out of the gate, beautiful things are prepared with love. The act of creating something of beauty is a way of bringing good into the world. It's really easy to get caught up, in the technical aspects of design. But Moore reminds us that the core of it is, creating something meaningful, something that has value and brings joy to other people.
Yeah, that is such a crucial point. And he goes on to illustrate this by talking about the beauty found in even the simplest objects, like a shaker chair, And the Shakers believe that outward appearances should reflect an inner spirit. So even a utilitarian object like a chair can be imbued with beauty through, careful craftsmanship, attention to detail. And what's so fascinating about that is how this seemingly simple idea can be applied to any creative endeavor. Whether you're designing a website, writing code, or even just planning a meeting, the principle's the same. You infuse it with care and intention, and the beauty will emerge.
I was thinking about that as I was reading the book. How often do we rush through tasks without, considering those finer details, those small touches that could elevate the experience for ourselves and others? It's a really good reminder to slow down and approach our work with intention.
Yeah, exactly. And Moore actually takes this even further by connecting it to something called the overview effect. Now, you're probably familiar with this, but for our listeners who might not be, it's that profound shifting perspective that astronauts experience when they see the Earth from space for the first time.
Right. It's this sense of awe and interconnectedness, and you realize, the fragility and the beauty of our planet. But how does that tie back to design?
Well, Moore talks specifically about Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut, who had this incredible epiphany, during the Apollo 14 mission. He described his experience with the phrase, salve corpus amanti. It's Latin. It means save the lover's body. Mitchell felt this overwhelming sense of unity, realizing that everything in the universe, including ourselves, is made from the same stardust. And that's the realization that should inform our approach to design. We need to think beyond, just individual objects. We need to think about the interconnectedness of everything that we create.
That's quite a leap, going from a shaker chair to the vastness of space.
Yeah.
But I see what you mean. It's about, recognizing the impact our creations have on the world around us and designing with a sense of responsibility for that.
Exactly. And it's about moving beyond, just ego-driven design and embracing this more holistic approach. And, it reminds me of another fascinating figure that Moore discusses, Doug Engelbart. He was the pioneer of the computer mouse and video conferencing.
Engelbart? Now, that's somebody I would associate with purely technical innovation. So what's the connection with beauty and design?
Well, Moore frames him not just as a tech innovator, but as a designer in the broadest sense of the word. Engelbart wasn't just building gadgets. He was actually using design to solve problems and to augment human knowledge. He was shaping the way that we interact with information and with each other. And that, in Moore's view, is a form of beauty in itself.
So it's not just about aesthetics. It's about the impact, the purpose behind the creation. Okay, so I'm starting to see how Moore's defining beauty much more broadly than I think we traditionally think of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it leads to a thought-provoking question. What world do you want to create through your work and through your actions? Because in a way, we're all designers, right?
I love that.
Yeah.
It's kind of empowering to think about ourselves as designers, as actively shaping the world around us.
It really makes you consider the impact of your choices. Every decision that we make, from the words that we use to the products we buy, contributes to the overall design of our world.
And it makes me think of something that Moore said about the power of language. He used the example of the French Revolution and how, the rhetoric, the language that was used by the revolutionaries actually played a significant role in shaping that new political reality.
Yeah, that's a great example. The power of language to shape our world is undeniable. It's like William Gibson coining the term cyberspace before it even existed, He essentially designed a future reality through words.
Okay, so we're all designers. We're wielding this power of language and creation. But where does stillness fit into all of this? Because Moore talks quite a bit about the importance of stillness for creativity, which seems kind of counterintuitive in this, always-on world that we live in.
Yeah, he does, and it's a fascinating point. He contrasts this popular notion that we need to be stressed and busy to be creative. Instead, he offers up this concept of stillness as a source of powerful creativity. He shares that example of a Tibetan calligrapher, Tashi Mannix, who needs a clear mind and emotions to create this intricate work that he does. Mannix needs stillness to achieve that level of focus and precision that his art demands.
It's really interesting. We're constantly bombarded with all these messages about productivity and busyness, but Moore seems to be suggesting that, slowing down and cultivating stillness might actually be the key to unlocking our creative potential.
And it's not just about being quiet. It's about creating space for reflection, letting those ideas emerge organically. It's about embracing the quiet moments where inspiration can strike.
While I was reading about stillness, I was thinking, isn't there a danger of becoming too passive? How do you balance stillness with the need for action and progress in your work?
That's a great question. And it's about finding the right balance, recognizing when to step back and reflect, and when to push forward with action. It's not about becoming a hermit or anything like that, but it's about creating that space for both contemplation and execution. Moore seems to be suggesting that true creativity emerges from this kind of delicate dance between stillness and action.
I like that. A delicate dance between stillness and action. It reminds me of that John Steinbeck quote that Moore includes. The free, exploring, curious mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world.
Yeah. Curiosity. It's another essential ingredient in Moore's recipe for creative success.
It's that innate drive.
Yeah.
To explore, to question, to push beyond the boundaries of what we already know.
Yeah.
If you think about figures like Galileo, Darwin, or Steve Jobs, they all challenged orthodoxies. They made their mark on the world through that relentless curiosity that they all had.
Yeah. They refused to accept the limitations of what they were told. And that kind of curiosity is so essential for pushing boundaries and leading to breakthroughs.
And sometimes those breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. Moore talks about that, doesn't he? The role of serendipity in creativity.
Yeah, he uses this hilarious analogy about the comedian Bill Bailey and how he approaches joke writing. Bailey says he starts with the laugh and he works backwards. Like he imagines the desired outcome, the laugh, and then he figures out the steps to get there.
That's so intriguing. It's like working backward from the desired outcome. I never really thought about applying that to design challenges before.
Yeah, it's about imagining the ideal solution first and then kind of reverse engineering the process to make it a reality.
And I imagine that process is rarely linear. There are bound to be mistakes and detours along the way.
Absolutely. Moore really emphasizes that failure is an inherent part of the creative process. And he quotes Pixar co-founder Ed Catmull, who said, "The greatest enemy of creative success is the attempt to fortify against failure."
So rather than fearing failure, we should embrace it as a necessary step on the path to, something truly innovative.
Exactly. It's about having that courage to experiment and not letting the fear of failure hold us back.
Now, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about someone Moore highlights as a master of design, Jony Ive, the legendary designer behind so many iconic Apple products. Moore really dives into Ive's incredible attention to detail, his mastery of materials, and his relentless pursuit of excellence.
And what's so fascinating about Ive's work is that it goes beyond just visual appeal. He really understands that great design considers the entire user experience.
Right. It's not just about how it looks. It's about how it feels in your hand and how intuitive it is to use.
And that's something that Moore emphasizes throughout the book, the importance of designing for all of the senses, not just the visual.
I love how he uses all these vivid examples in the book, like the feel of a warm sweater, the smell of baking bread, the sounds of a forest. He really wants us to remember just how rich our world is from a sensory perspective and how design can enhance those experiences.
It's about creating this holistic experience that engages all of our senses. It creates this deeper connection with the object or the environment that we're interacting with. Think about how you feel when you walk into a store that has a particular scent, or the way the texture of a product can make you want to touch it. It's all part of the design.
I think this is a good place to pause for now. I think we've covered a lot of ground already, from shaker chairs to the overview effect. And I'm really starting to see how Moore defines beauty in this broad, expansive way.
We've just scratched the surface.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Alan Moore's Do Design. Last night we were talking about how beauty is about so much more than just aesthetics. It's about intention, purpose, and even a sense of responsibility for the impact our creations have on the world.
Yeah, and Moore doesn't just leave us with these big ideas. He actually gives us some really practical tools for bringing more beauty into our own work. through his 14 practices for creating enduring beauty.
14 practices. Wow. I don't think we can cover all of them today, but let's dive into a few that stood out to you.
Okay, well, I think a good place to start would be with the first practice, be curious. Moore emphasizes that curiosity is the foundation of all creative endeavors. He even shares personal anecdotes about how he cultivates his own curiosity, observing the world around him, asking why, and constantly seeking deeper understanding.
So it's like he's saying that we need to approach the world with a childlike sense of wonder.
Exactly. He talks about how something as simple as a walk in the woods can spark a new idea or lead to a creative breakthrough. It's about paying attention to those small details, those little things that we often overlook, and asking yourself, what can I learn from this?
That really resonates with me. I know I'm guilty of, rushing through my day without really taking the time to observe my surroundings. But it sounds like Moore is suggesting that true inspiration often comes from those moments of quiet observation.
And it's not just about passively observing, it's about actively engaging with the world around us. And that leads us to the next practice that Moore highlights, go see.
Go see. I love this one. It's about getting out there, meeting people, learning from those who inspire you.
Yeah. Moore believes that firsthand experience is so valuable. He talks about how he visited companies like Yeo Valley Farms, not because he's an expert in organic farming, but because he was just curious about their approach. He wasn't afraid to reach out and learn from the best.
That's such a great reminder. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own little worlds that we forget to look outside for inspiration. But Moore is encouraging us to be bold, to seek out those who are doing amazing work and to learn from their experiences.
And to not be afraid to steal ideas, as he puts it. Of course, he doesn't mean plagiarism, but rather the idea that there's no need to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from those who've come before us and adapt their ideas to our own unique contexts.
I think that's something that a lot of creatives struggle with, that fear of not being original enough. But Moore seems to be suggesting that true originality often comes from building upon the work of others.
Exactly. It's about taking inspiration from a variety of sources and then filtering it through your own unique lens. And that brings us to another practice that I think is particularly relevant for anyone who wants to create something truly innovative. Recognize no boundaries.
Recognize no boundaries. Okay, I'm intrigued. What does that mean in the context of design?
Well, Moore believes that there are no limits to what we can create if we're willing to experiment and push beyond our perceived limitations. He even shares a personal story about creating artwork using this, unconventional combination of printing and imaging techniques. He essentially hacked a photocopier to create these large-scale prints that wouldn't have been possible using traditional methods.
He hacked a photocopier. I love that.
Yeah.
It really speaks to that spirit of playfulness and experimentation that I think is so important for creativity.
Absolutely. It's about thinking outside the box, challenging conventions, and not being afraid to break the rules.
Okay, so we've talked about curiosity, the importance of seeking out inspiration, and pushing beyond boundaries. What other gems does Moore have in store for us?
Well, one practice that I think is particularly relevant in today's world is let go of fear.
Let go of fear. Easier said than done right. I think we all struggle with fear at some point in our creative journeys.
Oh, absolutely. But Moore encourages us to trust our instincts, to have conviction in our ideas and not let fear paralyze us. He acknowledges that putting yourself out there can be scary, but the rewards are often worth the risk.
It's interesting because I think fear often manifests as self-doubt. You start second-guessing your ideas and wondering if they're good enough.
That's true. And I think Moore is reminding us that it's okay to feel fear, but we can't let it dictate our actions. We need to find ways to move through the fear and trust in our own creative vision.
So how do we do that? How do we actually let go of fear and embrace that sense of creative confidence?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that fear is often rooted in a fear of failure. We're afraid of putting our work out there and having it be rejected or criticized. But as we discussed earlier, failure is an inherent part of the creative process. It's through our mistakes that we learn and grow.
So maybe it's about reframing failure as a learning opportunity rather than something to be feared.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective and recognizing that every failure is simply a step closer to success.
Yeah, it kind of takes the pressure off, doesn't it? It allows us to be more experimental and take more risks.
And speaking of taking risks, another practice that Moore highlights is perseverance.
Ah, yes, perseverance.
Yeah.
That grit and determination that's so essential for achieving anything worthwhile.
Yeah. Moore reminds us that creative success rarely happens overnight. He shares those stories of Willie Nelson, who didn't achieve mainstream success until he was 40, and Mary Wesley, who published her first novel when she was 70.
That's incredible. It's a good reminder that it's never too late to pursue your passions and achieve your creative goals.
Exactly. And he also uses this beautiful analogy of his beech hedge, which took years to flourish. It's a reminder that, time is earthed, as he puts it. Some things just take the time they take. You can't rush the process.
This whole idea of time is earthed really resonates with me. I'm the notoriously impatient person, but I'm learning to appreciate the slow burn of certain creative endeavors.
It's a valuable lesson in a world that's obsessed with instant gratification, It's important to remember that some things require time and patience to fully blossom.
And I imagine that having a deep passion for what you do makes that slow burn a lot more enjoyable. Moore talks about this too, doesn't he? The importance of loving the work that you do.
He does. He shares this great example of Blitz Motorcycles. It's a company founded by these two friends, Hugo and Fred, and they restore vintage motorcycles. And their passion for their craft is truly infectious. They emphasize the joy of learning, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful, and the importance of building a life that aligns with your values.
It's not just about the bikes, it's about creating a life you love. And I think that really resonates with people. When you're genuinely passionate about what you do, it shows in the quality of your work.
Yeah, precisely. And that sense of passion, it draws people in, that makes them want to be a part of what you're creating.
It's like that saying, do what you love, and the money will follow. But it's not just about the money, is it? It's about finding that sense of fulfillment and purpose in your work.
Exactly. And and you find that it's truly a beautiful thing.
Speaking of beautiful things, Moore also talks about the power of we over me.
He does. He highlights Muhammad Ali's, simple but profound poem, Me, We. It's a reminder that while we need to be true to ourselves as individuals, our greatest accomplishments often come from collaboration and a sense of community.
And he backs this up with some pretty concrete examples. Like he talks about Pixar's Brain Trust, which is this process where filmmakers come together to openly critique each other's work in a spirit of trust and collaboration.
Exactly. Pixar has been able to create such consistently amazing films by embracing this collaborative process. They created this culture where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas, giving and receiving feedback, and working together to achieve a common goal.
It's funny, we often think of creativity as this solitary pursuit, but Moore seems to be suggesting that it thrives in a collaborative environment.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important takeaway for anyone who wants to create something truly exceptional. It's about recognizing that, we don't have to do it all alone. We can achieve so much more when we work together, sharing our ideas and supporting each other along the way.
I think that's a great place to pause for now. We've covered a lot of ground in this section. We explored some of Moore's key practices for creating enduring beauty.
Indeed.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of Alan Moore's Do Design. Why beauty is key to everything. It's been really interesting, hasn't it? Unpacking his ideas about, beauty being so much more than just aesthetics, but, as this force for good in the world, this thing that can be intentionally designed into everything we do.
And in the last part, we were talking about collaboration and the power of we over me. And I think that leads really well into the final section of Moore's book, where he kind of brings everything full circle, connecting it back to the overview effect and that sense of interconnectedness.
Right. That feeling that astronauts describe when they see Earth from space for the first time. Such a powerful image. And Moore uses it to emphasize how, our individual actions are all, part of this much larger system.
Exactly. He connects the dots between abstract art, the limits of language, and our understanding of nature. He talks about Gerhard Richter's abstract paintings that evoke, the power of natural forces, and Robert McFarlane's observations about how language often falls short in capturing the true complexity of the natural world.
Almost like Moore is saying that beauty exists beyond our ability to fully, grasp or articulate it. It's something we experience and feel rather than something we can always define with words.
Yeah, and that leads us back to Mitchell's Salve Corpus Amanti, save the lover's body. It's a call to action, a reminder to approach design with a sense of responsibility, recognizing the interconnectedness of all things.
So it's not just about creating beautiful objects. It's about, considering the impact those creations have on the environment, on society, on the world as a whole.
Exactly. More challenges us to think about design in a much broader sense. It's not just about aesthetics. It's about creating a world that's more sustainable, more equitable, and, more in harmony with the natural order.
It's almost like he's elevating design to a moral imperative. He's saying that we have this, responsibility to use our creative powers for good.
And he reminds us that this responsibility extends beyond just designers to everyone. We're all creators in our own way. Every choice that we make, every action we take contributes to the overall design of our world.
So how do we put these ideas into practice? What are some concrete steps we can take to bring more beauty and intentionality into our lives?
Well, Moore offers a number of suggestions, but I think it really boils down to embracing that craftsman's mindset. He encourages us to be curious, to pay attention to those details, to strive for excellence in everything that we do.
Yeah, he also talks about slowing down, taking the time to, really understand the materials that we're working with.
Right.
And considering the long-term impact of our creations.
And to not be afraid to experiment, push boundaries, and embrace failure as a necessary part of that creative process.
It's really inspiring, isn't it? It's like this reminder that we all have this power to make a difference, to bring more beauty and meaning into the world.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't have to be grand gestures either. Moore reminds us that even the smallest acts of creation can have this ripple effect.
So what small act of beauty or design can you bring into your world today?
That's a question for all of us to ponder.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. This deep dive into Alan Moore's Do Design has been a real eye-opener for me. It's challenged me to think differently about beauty, about design, and about my own role in, shaping the world around me.
Yeah, me too. It's been a really fascinating journey.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. I hope you found it as thought-provoking as I have.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this exploration of Do Design. Until next time, keep seeking beauty in everything you do.